Welcome, everybody. It's wonderful to see all of you here at the Norman Rockwell Museum this evening. Thank you so much for coming out for this very special event. My name is Stephanie Plunkett. I'm Deputy Director and Chief Curator here at the Norman Rockwell Museum, and I'd like to also introduce you to Director Laurie Norton-Moffett, who is here, and of course our Curator of Education, Tom Daly, and we're all very, very happy to see you. So as many of you may know, this spring, the beautiful and informative Berkshire Magazine published a wonderful story on the art of Setsuko Sato Winchester. And the article focuses on the exploration and the journey that she and her husband, author Simon Winchester, took to 10 former Japanese internment camps, representing a challenging and little understood aspect of American history. Their conversation this evening will shed light on Setsuko's Freedom from Fear Yellow Bowl project, which is intended to raise awareness of the Japanese-American internment in the spirit of informing, educating, and conveying hope rather than fear. I'd like to thank very much, it's really a great pleasure for us to have partnered with Berkshire Magazine on this special event. So we are co-presenting, and some of you may know that the wonderful editor Anastasia Stanmeyer is here in the back, as well as Kara Vermeulen, associate publisher, and I'd like to thank them both very much for certainly a really wonderful article, but also the incredible work that they do in Berkshire Magazine. So thank you for partnering this program with us. And thank you, too, for bringing free copies of the magazine. So please make sure that you get your spring issue, which is out in the museum lobby before you go tonight. It's a great pleasure and honor to have Setsuko and Simon with us at the Norman Rockwell Museum this evening. And I'd like to tell you a little bit more about them, even though you probably know a great deal already. Setsuko Sato Winchester is a gifted artist, journalist, and a former National Public Radio producer and commentator. Her Freedom from Fear T-Bowl project features powerful photographic images that picture her handmade yellow T-bowls at World War II era Japanese-American internment campsites and at other national sites throughout the country, including Franklin Delano Roosevelt Four Freedoms Park in New York, here at the Norman Rockwell Museum in the Four Freedoms Gallery, which is right behind us, and especially focusing on Norman Rockwell's Freedom from Fear painting from 1943, as well as on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. Setsuko is also a member of the Scholars Advisory Board of the Norman Rockwell Museum's upcoming international traveling exhibition, Enduring Ideals, Rockwell, Roosevelt, and the Four Freedoms, which very appropriately will feature her art, and we are looking forward to that. In fact, the exhibition opens next June of 2018, and that will be at the New York Historical Society. Simon Winchester is a celebrated author and journalist who during his career at The Guardian covered numerous significant events, including Bloody Sunday and the Watergate scandal. As an author, he has written or contributed to more than a dozen nonfiction books and has written a novel. And his articles have appeared in several noted publications, including Condé Nast Traveler, Smithsonian Magazine, and National Geographic. His acclaimed books include The Professor and the Madman, The Map That Changed the World, The Meaning of Everything, A Crack in the Edge of the World, and this is a long one, Pacific, Silicon Chips and Surfboards, Coral Reefs and Atom Bombs, Brutal Dictators, Fading Empires, and the Coming Collision of the World's Superpowers, among others. It is a great thrill to have them both with us, and they are actually going to have a conversation about this amazing project. So please help me to welcome Simon and Setsuko.
Well, thank you very much. I'm of the pair, Simon, you may have realized that. And we converse every day, so it's a bit unusual conversing in front of a large group of people. I think we're delighted and encouraged at the number of people. This is very flattering and validating for this remarkable project of Setsu's. I think we should start with the background, which really began, 74 days after the declaration of war, which was the 8th of December 1941. We come to the 19th of February 1942, when, on the advice of one general, a chap called de Witt, in the far west of the United States, that certain people ought to be removed because of their possible security threat implications from that zone. And he persuaded, with the advice of some other people, President Roosevelt, FDR, sitting in the White House in Washington, to sign an executive order. And we've heard all too much about executive orders in the first few days of Mr. Trump's presidency. Well, Executive Order 9066 is the one we're talking about here, and I'll get Setsu to explain what this notorious order of the 19th of February 1942 was all about. Setsu, what was 9066? How did it operate? And what did it do? Who did it affect?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that a year ago, I was invited by Northwest Connecticut Community College. And I think 10 people showed up. So I'm very encouraged that there's a few more people who are interested in this
Massachusetts is a much more liberal
topic.
state.
Yeah.
Much more intelligent.
But basically what happened was that after Pearl Harbor, the FBI rounded up about 2,000 or in total 5,000 individuals that they had on a list that they would pick up if something happened. So, and they were foreign nationals, immigrants. And then they also froze their bank accounts. They put a travel restriction and a curfew on anybody of Japanese ethnicity. And then by February, there was discussion that the people who are left are still a threat. So that this EO 9066 basically said that the military was in charge and they could evacuate anybody they wanted to. It didn't say Japanese people, and specifically, they said anybody they wanted to. And so, 120,000, 120,000 people were evacuated to relocation camps. But one of the things that people don't know is that initially, the military asked people of Japanese ethnicity to voluntarily leave. And actually 10,000 people did. They packed up, their stuff in trucks and vans, and they tried to leave to families in other states or friends in other states who offered them refuge. But when they reached the border of the next state, most of them were stopped. There were protests that said, if any Japs come over the line, there's going to be a massacre. There was, most governors said, if they're dangerous in California, then they're going to be dangerous here. And they said they didn't want them. So it created a situation that made things extremely dangerous, not just for the refugees, but for the people who lived in other states, because they were terrified. So the military said, okay, everybody back, because a lot of them were stranded because nobody would sell them gas. People were camped out in parks because people wouldn't rent them, hotels or anything. So the military said, everybody back. And they said, okay, no one can leave. Everybody must go into 10 camps. And, one by one, they did different zones. And depending on where you were, you would be gathered into assembly centers. So, some of them, one was like Santa Anita Racetrack. So, they had thousands and thousands all of a sudden in a racetrack. And then slowly, as the camps were built, and actually they sent some of the internees early to help build it because, you didn't have enough people. You didn't have enough labor because a lot of the soldiers were all fighting or there. So ironically, they helped build their own prisons.
Well, let's have a look. I believe, Tom, the first
Yeah.
slide will be a map to show
Yeah.
you where
Yeah.
these camps were. And
Yes.
there were,
Yeah,
it's a
so
little
basically we
confusing because-
started, we started off in Massachusetts, and then we went to Rower, which was in Arkansas, which I didn't know that there were any camps that far east in America. And then we went to Poston, Manzanar, came back to Gila River, and I'll explain why, because that's complicated, and then Grenada and back. And then in the spring, because it was December and winter was coming, in the spring we went back up to Hart Mountain, Minidoka, Tule Lake, Topaz, and then back. So that was our 10
There's another
camps.
map too. Should we look at that, the second one, if that's possible?
Yeah,
And
I
this
don't know if it'll
is
show
slightly
up.
more detailed.
Does it show up? No.
Before we actually describe these two expeditions, which were quite remarkable, I want to know what you, Setsi, knew about the internment. I mean, you are a New Yorker. You were born in, I won't tell the year, but you were born
That's
here.
okay.
Well, around
62.
1962,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it was. So you're absolutely an American. Your parents came here in the 50s from Japan. In your schooling, I want to know what you learned of this situation. And I should say, first of all, and this is something confessional, that I, as brought up in England, knew nothing at all about this. And when I first heard about it, very glibly, with the sort of casual racism that is sort of inherent in most English people, I'm afraid, I thought, oh, I'm sure they probably deserved it, they needed to be locked up. So my view was very primitive, and obviously now I believe precisely the opposite. It's very much a poacher turned gamekeeper situation. But your situation is somewhat different. So tell us, Setsi, what you knew about this internment as you were growing up.
Well, I didn't know about it until I was about 13, I think. It was around 1973 that this book came out called Farewell to Manzanar. And I had a substitute teacher who came in for the week because our teacher was sick. And when she realized she had a Japanese student, she brought in this book. And she told the story about internment camps. And I think everyone was shocked. I was shocked. And I thought, I was embarrassed. I thought, wait, why did they do that to, and actually one of the kids said, they wouldn't do that. They don't do that in America. That's something they do in Nazi Germany. But the teacher said, no, this happened. This happened right here in America. And then one of them said, well, if that were true, she ought to know. And they pointed at me. And I was like, I just wanted to crawl into the table. And I think it was so traumatic. And I just never explored it again. I just knew that it was something bad. And even when I tried to ask, people didn't know. People, nobody said, And I asked my mother. My mother didn't know. I later found out that one of the reasons is that a lot of those who were incarcerated never spoke about it. A lot of them didn't talk about it to their children, so their children didn't even know. Also, they had spent most of their lives trying to prove that they were American, because there were lots of anti-Asian legislation that stretched back to the 1880s. And so 1882, Chinese Exclusion Act, 1875, the Page Act, which said that Chinese women couldn't immigrate to the United States unless they could prove they were not a prostitute. 1908 Gentleman's Agreement, which effectively banned all Japanese people first. And then by 1921, 1924, all Asian people were banned from the United States. Korean, Chinese, Filipino, Indian, and there was no immigration of any Asian people allowed until the 40s with the war with Japan and China. All of a sudden, China was an ally of the United States, so they were allowed Chinese immigration. So that's so. All the Japanese people were trying to say, hey, I'm an American. So when I realized that when my parents came after the war in the 50s, most of the Japanese people were saying, hey, I don't know them. I have nothing to do with them. I'm an American. And I remember meeting some Japanese Americans, and I would say, "Oh, are you Japanese?" And they would say, "No, I'm an American." So I never understood
And your father
this
became,
attitude, but now I do.
your
I
father
understand.
became almost, not a caricature of an American, but he bought Buicks. That was his favorite car.
Oh yeah, he bought
worked in a
every. He had
steakhouse.
a
He went-
Dodge Dart.
And he was educated at a college in Kentucky. I mean, he was so American and so keen on America. So this kind of thing is an especial affront to people, Japanese ethnicity, who were determined to be, and in many other ways, which we'll explain later on, American. So, all right, well, we know what you knew, and then you came to learn a great deal more about it. Once you had learned about it, Setsuko, what did you then decide to do about it? And that brings us to the nub of the story. What did you do when you decided this was such an
originally, I
injustice?
think I felt that I needed to look into this for myself as a journalist. I felt ashamed that I didn't know my own story, history in America. But I realized that after 9/11, there was a lot of fear. There was more and more fear. Like a lot of the things that people were saying, the government, politicians, it sounded a lot like the things that I was reading in all my research. Very, very similar. And I had a feeling that someone like, you know, little fascistic tendencies could arise. There was almost a roadmap to the 40s. So I felt that I've done enough World War II anniversary shows on NPR to know that there are some things you just cannot talk about. And that if you say certain things, you will get a barrage of criticism from veterans, you know, people who fought in the World War II. So I didn't want to write anything. I thought, and by then I had become a ceramicist, and I started, I was doing ceramics, and I thought, one time when we came back from a talk, this woman, a very elegant woman, she was the head of a club, and she said...
in Los Angeles.
Yeah, in Los Angeles. And we were talking about internment, and I said, what do they teach about internment in California? And she said, oh, you know, my dear, it was a terrible thing, but the government had to do it to protect the Japanese people. And I thought, wow, that's interesting, you know, that's what they're teaching now. And I thought, I need to do something to get the story out, but I wanted to do it in a way that would be gentle and not hurtful, because World War II was a very important time. There was a lot of heroism. There's a lot of people who are proud. I didn't want to step on those kind of feelings. But I also realized that if I, as a Japanese American, kept quiet about this incident, I realized that it could easily happen to somebody else. It's right there. So that's when I started like pinching bowls like crazy, and I decided to pinch different tea bowls. I saw them as people, and I pinched them as families, so they're all glazed, like, you know, this is a family,
when you
mom,
say pinch,
dad,
you didn't
children.
do them on the wheel, right?
Yeah, I didn't do it on the wheel. I hand pinch because I like the irregularity. I like the fact that it's imperfect. And it's also based on the philosophy of tea. You know, the fact that you just take time to stop and have a cup of tea with somebody and just get to know each other. It's about appreciating humanity, that we're all imperfect, but it's lovely, you know. It's like cherry blossoms. No petal is exactly the same, but together they're just beautiful.
So you made 120?
Yeah. So I made 120 to symbolize the 120,000 people.
We packed them up in a big series of boxes and put them in the back of the Land Rover. And in, November, December 2015, we set out to do the 6 southern camps, beginning with the 2 in Arkansas, which are the most easterly, just on the
They're
west.
like 27 miles apart, and in the middle, 13 miles between Rower and Jerome, there's a museum now that was opened in 2012.
Why don't we look at the first picture? Tom, if you can turn to the first slide. This is the bowls in
In Rower.
a muddy
yeah.
field in Rower.
Yeah, and this is where George Takei, the Star Trek person was, actor, was here first. And the next one is Jerome. That's
The only,
Jerome.
in both cases, we can perhaps flip between the two, is the only relic now is the chimney in the distance. You
Oh
can
yeah,
see.
that's the chimney from the
Also
hospital.
gives you the idea of the size. These were vast camps, and these two, I think they had about 18,000 people in each, which made them the
No.
14,000
yeah.
together,
Yeah,
was it?
yeah.
Made them essentially the fourth or fifth biggest city in Arkansas. Obviously,
Yeah.
Little Rock first, and this fairly soon thereafter.
Yeah, now they're private farms now, but when George Takei, I was just on with him, heard him talk recently. He said that it was a swamp, and that
This is the floodplain of the lower Mississippi. This is the delta.
And trying to place the bowls in the field was so muddy. I got my foot caught. I couldn't get my leg out. And this was in the winter, which was kind of pleasant. I can't imagine what it was like.
But I remember you
in
saying
the
when you
summer.
were stuck in the mud that you felt that you were going to be interned and were never going to get away from it.
But yeah, what was interesting, the museum in the middle was run by the curator, was this petite, elegant, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Southern lady with this amazing Southern lilt. And she proceeded to tell me the history of the internment camps. And afterwards, I said to her, I said, you know, I love this. I love all this information you're telling me, but I just have to stop you there for a second, because when we came down to the museum, there's a sign on the main road that says Japanese American internment camp, and it's like shot off the corner. So I said to her, what's with the sign? So she said, well, you know. And I was like, no, I don't know. So she says, well, sometimes you come in and you see some trouble. Some days you just come in and you're minding your own business, and most of the people around here have no idea what this place is, so they don't even bother. But sometimes there's people who come in and they have to let you know what they think, and they say, you know, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. You know, you're doing the museum for a bunch of people who try to kill us, and you know. And I said to her, oh my God, why are you doing this? I said, you're not Japanese. You don't need to be, you know, harassed by your neighbors. And she said, you know, my father worked at the camps back then, and he said that these were good people, and it's just the right thing to do. And I just, like, I don't know, I felt really ashamed that I had never done anything before, and that here's this Southern lady who has nothing to do with it doing this. And, you know,
Well, then from there,
Yeah.
I just don't want you to get too
No, I
terribly
know,
upset.
but I just feel like that lady, like she
was
doesn't.
wonderful.
Yeah,
She
she's
was
amazing. There's a lot of good Americans out there. There's a lot of people who cared back then and today. And I have to say, this trip really gave me hope about America. It also gave me concern about America. But there are a lot of really good people out there,
Well,
and I
let
just
us-
want to let people know
okay,
that.
Okay, sweetie.
Yeah. Okay.
Very good.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
So we then continued the drive westwards. We crossed the rest
Yeah,
of
yeah.
Arkansas. We crossed all of Texas. And we eventually came to western Arizona.
Yeah.
This is in the floodplain of another river, the Colorado. And the camp is called Poston. That was a really big one. It was divided into
Yeah, it was one of the largest
That was
camps.
about
That was like
18,000 people.
Yeah, and it was called Roastin', Toastin', and Poston,
Poston.
because it was divided into 3 camps. And,
So tell us a little about that and
well,
how we
this-
found it. Because it was difficult to find at first,
well,
wasn't it?
this was actually put on an Indian reservation land, because originally no states would take these people. They're like, we don't want them here. So they put them on Indian land, because, you know, put them on Indian land. This actually is a lot remaining, because a lot of it looks like the last 2 camps. There's nothing there. And these are unusual from the other camps in that they're made out of adobe. Most of them were wood. And this is the concrete pad of a school, but the native, the American Indians, I should say, supposedly they like to be called American because they say they are American, you know. Yeah. So they actually used it. They actually used these as a community center. But when we were driving through the town trying to find it, nobody knew what it was.
Except
They
for
were like,
Woody.
what? Yeah, they just thought it was a community center for the natives, like for the community. They didn't know the history of it. Yeah. So finally we went to the delicatessen called Woody's. And somebody said, oh, ask Woody, he's back in the refrigerator section. And so he came out and he said, oh, there's a clutch of palm trees. There's like one block that had been saved, and that's it. And now it's covered in fencing. And there was a little hole in the fence, so we managed to bring all the teapots through the hole, and then I arranged them in families, because I was imagining, oh, the families are just hanging out. So they're all glazed separately. And so, so that's Poston.
And after that, we crossed the Colorado into Southern California.
Yeah.
And this is now in the southeastern Sierra Mountains. In fact, on the right-hand side of the picture, out of sight, is Mount Whitney. And this is a valley, Death Valley is off to the left. And they've put up a watchtower, they've reconstructed it. This is just outside the perimeter fence. Inside is a fairly sophisticated National Park Service visitor center. But as Setsuko notes, it's an unfunded mandate, and so often it's closed down and the staff are on furlough. But it's a brave attempt by the National Park Service to memorialize, one, this is Manzanar, where Farewell from Manzanar was written. And as you can see, a fairly bleak countryside, although surrounded by rather spectacular mountains. How many were here, do you think? It was fairly big. There were two in California, but the other one has a very sinister implication to it, and we'll get to talk about that later. So I had to give a lecture near here in Pasadena, so after doing that and seeing this site, we turned around and went back to Arizona, because the next Arizonan camp was actually a very difficult one to visit. And Setsuko will tell us about that, and you'll perhaps, Tom, show us that picture, right?
The day before we were headed here, we were at Caltech because he had to give a talk. And I had CNN on, and Donald Trump was on television saying, FDR was a really great president. You know, we admire him. He used internment for the Japanese people, and I think it could be a solution for the Muslim problem. And I just thought, oh my God, I really need to get this project done really quickly. Yeah,
lead in your pencil,
so that's, and then the next day we were going to Manzanar. So, after Manzanar, which I have to say is one of the best internment camp in terms of the National Park Service. It's beautifully done. If people get a chance to go there, Death Valley is gorgeous. There's beautiful, breathtaking mountains and countryside. So I would suggest going there. Poston is on.
This is Gila River.
Gila River is on sovereign Indian land. So this is the hardest site to get to. You normally have to have a 3-month process. It's like trying to get a visa to India or something like that. But they expedited the process for us, so we were able to get on there. But
It's a remarkably helpful man.
Paul
Paul Shorthair, yes.
He was amazing, and I arranged these to mimic the arch, the memorial arch at the top of the hill. That was for the soldiers who died. But there's actually a lot of remains here. There was actually a grave for a dog named Cookie, who just lived there, because most people had to leave their pets behind. You weren't allowed to bring any animals. So Cookie was this beloved, I think very healing element in the camp. You could tell he was very loved. So, but you know, things like that remain there. This had two other camps, Butte and this one. So, yeah.
So then we set out from there, heading back east, and we passed Four Corners, where Utah, Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico join, and then over the past Durango, over the Rocky Mountains, come into the rain shadow into eastern Colorado, and this was a camp known either as Granada or Amache. This was the state which, if you remember, the then governor, Ralph Carr, was very sympathetic to the Japanese who were being excluded from the far west and said, well, we certainly here in Colorado will welcome them. And it's interestingly topical because just 2 days ago in Colorado, they were debating all manner of the immigration policies of the state. And a man, I forget his name, rather lengthy Hispanic name, stood up and made a speech vituperatively anti-immigrant and said we should reopen internment camps in Colorado and put people in prison if necessary. So he said, how dare you support Ralph Carr's memory? He was a bad man, blah, 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 blah. So a small indication, a telling indication that some hostility in state legislatures still is occasioned. This one, anyway, this camp is essentially run by a schoolmaster who lives in the nearby town, and I think you found his work very touching, very interesting.
Well, the principal's name is John Harper, and he single-handedly runs this whole town. He was the principal, he was the councilman, he wears so many hats, and he runs this one-room museum. He collects all kinds of letters, artifacts, items, and if you call him, he'll come running over and open the museum for you. And he runs it with his students, who are mostly Latino students. Yeah, and that also has a lot of left from the camps. And it's also, I guess, because of Governor Carr. Governor Carr, he said, if no other state will take these people, I will, you know, they can come to my state. And everyone in the state was like, no! There's a lot of people who said, don't let them in here. And because of that, he actually lost re-election. But he, you know, while he was in charge, he said he would take them. And actually, it's Milton Eisenhower, the younger brother of Dwight Eisenhower, who became the first director of the WRA, the War Relocation Authority, which was the next executive order to, you know, this order to run these camps. And he realized that one way he could get states to take these people was to say that they're very talented farmers because a lot of the Japanese farmers, you know, if you can't speak English, at least you can farm, right? So a lot of them turned to farming. In Washington State, for example, they were producing 75% of all the produce. In California, there were 2% of the population. Not all of them are farmers, but they were producing 40% of all the produce, and on some of the worst land possible that they overpaid for, right? So.
And then had confiscated.
Yeah, but Milton Eisenhower said to the Farm Bureau, hey, does anybody want these people? So that's how they ended up on a lot of these other
and
camps.
Vastly improved the land and put in irrigation systems and grew all manner of crops that the white farmers had never been able to grow. So we then came back east and returned to Sandersfield here. Hold on a wee second. Perhaps go back to the previous one, Tom, if we can just. So we came back, spent the winter, and then when spring in the northern states, because we realized that the northern states would be difficult to travel through in the depths of winter. So come late April, early May, we set out again. This time, instead of heading south towards Arkansas, we head north towards Minnesota and hit the first camp in early May, and that's Heart Mountain in Wyoming, which is just near the town of Cody. So Tom, if we can go to the next there. As you can see, very bleak, and it was a very bleak day as well. And Heart Mountain itself, which is a very unusual shaped, heart-shaped mountain, off to the left here, you couldn't see because of the fires. Do you remember there were the oil fires that broke out in central Alberta, and all the winds were coming from the north, and they blew smoke down? Well, that is smoke from Canada, which is
yeah,
changed.
ironically, we were able to see Hart Mountain the day before, because I had come to check out the site and where I wanted to put the bowls. And then we came, and you couldn't see the mountain at all. But I also chose images that weren't stereotypical of the spot, because everybody takes it in front of Hart Mountain. So this actually is one of the most substantial buildings that were left, and it has been saved. So that was the hospital chimney. And so this Hart Mountain, it's a private museum. It's not run by the National Park Service, but it's one of the best little museums. Has amazing staff. The history there is fantastic. And I just love them. I still call them. I think the scholarship there is amazing, and they're one of the people who are really trying to get this story out about America. This is American history. It's not, Japanese history. It's not minority history. This happened in America.
So then we headed west from there and over through Montana, and eventually fetched up in southern Idaho in potato country. And that is the picture which Anastasia very cleverly, I think, put in the lead picture in Berkshire Magazine, this excellent magazine. That is it's called Minidoka. It is run, like Manzanar, by the National Park Service. There is a small but quite good interpretative center. There's an old root cellar, which is actually in the distance in that picture.
Well, it's actually not run. There are no people there.
There are no
They're
people
just
there, right.
little kiosks that you can read, but it's basically empty. Most of the they're run by a national park nearby, where it's a park, and then they'll run over into to the interment site to help. But yeah, I just love, this is one of my favorite images because a storm was coming, and I knew I had to get this shot really quickly because we had to leave. I didn't have another day, and so I quickly took the picture, and it sort of made me, it's the image that illustrates how I felt about this storm coming to America, So I was really pleased that the photo editor at Berkshire Magazine chose
It does remind me, though, what an
yeah.
immensely long line 120 bowls made. I often wish you made just 20. It would be easier to put them down. So rather than going on to the next picture, Tom, just for a second, I think you ought to explain the importance of the next camp we went to, which was Tule Lake in Northern California. And that has a particular significance, which I think, Setsi, if you'll explain what that was all about.
Well, Tule Lake was the worst camp out of all the camps because that was where you went if you were not loyal. It was the no boys ended up there. So there was a prison within a prison. This, in 1943, basically, after Midway, the military and the government realized that there was no longer a military necessity to incarcerate these people. So they had to figure out a way to get them out. So they decided, let's do a loyalty questionnaire. And this caused a lot of consternation because they said, hey, we put all these people here because we said you could not determine loyalty. And now you're saying that we're going to determine loyalty? And part of the reason to try to figure out loyalty was because they wanted them to go fight. Roosevelt said, let's let them fight. We'll make a segregated unit of just Japanese soldiers. So question number 27 and 28 literally tore the camps apart. Separated mother from father, sister, brother, because, as you can see, the question 27, are you willing to serve in the armed forces of the United States on combat duty wherever ordered? And some people said yes, a lot of people said yes, of course, but some people said yes, as soon as you let me out of here and go back to my house, or as soon as I step out of the gates and I'm free, as a free citizen, as long as I'm in prison, to ask me to go fight is a little much. And so even if it was a yes and you put a qualification, that was seen as a no. So you had one no. Question 28, will you forswear unqualified allegiance to the United States of America and faithfully defend the United States from any or all attack, and forswear allegiance and obedience to the Japanese emperor? And a lot of them said, well, I'm an American, I've never been to Japan, I don't speak Japanese, and he's not my emperor. So they were like, I'm, yes to the first one, but the second one, if I say yes, is that saying that I'm loyal to the emperor? They thought it was a trick question. They were trying to, trick them to say that they were loyal. So, a lot of people wrote no. So anybody who had two no's were called the no-no boys.
And they were sent, if you go back to the previous picture now.
Yeah, they were sent to Tule Lake. And that's the jail within the camp. That's Castle Rock, and the camp goes on and on. But that was where all the they have jail cells about that big, and they would have like 25 adults in them, and we were there. You'll see a group of school children. The National Park Service was actually giving a talk, and they would go in with a group of 10, and we all stood in the cell, and we were pretty crowded in, and they said, well, there were 25 people in here. So they would take turns sleeping, supposedly, like on the ground, some standing, and they were in there for a long time. Some people were there for years. Anyway, what's interesting about this place, every place I went to, since the first place, and I asked the curator, do you see any trouble? I always ask, do you see any trouble? And all of them have, vandalism, things are shot up. There's always some kind of trouble. But this place, the National Park Service, Kenneth Doubt, he said, this is the West. Everybody shoots up everything, everybody's got a gun. It's hard to tell if it's racist or whatever, but he said, I have to say one thing. Since Donald Trump came out in December talking about internment for Japanese people, and also the mayor of Roanoke also agreed with him, and he said that there's been a lot of people coming to the camps to find out about internment, to find out how it worked, so that it could be because they heard it was it could solve the Muslim problem. So all of a sudden it was a popular place because of
And those buildings in the background are part of the original camp. This is just a tiny portion of the camp, which extends, sometimes on their free days they could go up to Castle Rock, which is the outcrop behind, but it's a gigantic camp, but this is the most notorious part. Yeah. And because there were, quote, troublemakers in it, it was surrounded by tanks and double strands of barbed wire and things. It was a very menacing place. So we left that, headed back now, we turned around just as we had in Manzanar, headed back eastwards to the last of the 10 camps, and that should be the next after the, yes, this
so
one.
this is Topaz.
In Utah.
And I arranged this in this shape because Block 29 is where the church was. There are 3 churches. What most people don't realize is that a lot of the Japanese Americans, when they immigrated to the United States, converted to Christianity. So a lot of them were Christian. So I guess race trumped religion. It didn't matter if you were Christian. You still had to go. So this Topaz also has a beautiful museum, but it doesn't have any information in it. It's kind of strange. It's one of the longest established private museums. It's not part of the National Park Service, but It's kind of a mystery why there's no information in there. This is an important park because this is where Mine Okubo was. Mine Okubo is a very famous artist who probably did the first graphic novel of a concentration camp, and it's called Citizen 13660, and it's great. It's a graphic novel. I think it's children,
Still
adults.
in print,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great way to learn about what happened on the camps.
After this, so we've done with the 10 camps, and we now had to do, and slightly out of order, but Setsi will describe them, put the bowls in 5 important places, and I think places that are important to stories. So Tom, maybe you can show us the first of these. This is the southern end of Roosevelt Island in New York. This
so
is
January of 2016, I'm a New Yorker, I was born in New York. I always loved this place. I think it's really beautiful. It's right in the middle of the East River, and I go running over to the river, and I could see this from where I run. And I thought, I want to bring my T-bowls there, freedom from fear. I want to say, this is what you were afraid of, me.
So this is four freedoms.
So at the very end is a large bust of FDR, and on the other side are the 4 freedoms carved in marble. So this is my...
So the next one?
So the next place I took it to, I'm a New Yorker, and I'm also in Massachusetts. And I remember the first time I came here, and I went to the 4 Freedoms Rotunda, and I looked at that picture, and I thought, wow, freedom from fear. That's what freedom from fear looks like. And I thought, well, I guess I wasn't included in those protections. Actually, not in any of them. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of want or fear. And also, I wanted to focus on one bowl to say, they were individuals, although they were called Yellow Peril, which is why I painted them all yellow.
But as you so eloquently said just now, you are what they were afraid of.
And that I'm not that scary. I hope you don't think so.
The next one, Tom.
And then the next one, I took them to the Supreme Court because 4 cases went to the Supreme Court. The most important is Fred Korematsu. He tested Executive Order 9066. There was Gordon Hirabayashi, Mitsue Endo, which actually that was found unconstitutional to imprison a loyal American, who had done nothing wrong. She was a citizen. One was Executive Order 9066 was military necessity, so they sort of kept it that way. And then the other one was the curfew and the travel ban. So the other 3 were found constitutional, but later the Japanese American archivists, when the Freedom of Information Act, they started opening the archives, and she went through some of FDR's papers and the administration's papers, and they found out that the administration had all the information to prove their innocence, but they had kept it secret. So that's why. So now, because of, I'm not a lawyer, but like quorum nobis, or I don't.
Quorum nobis.
Yeah. Supposedly those rulings were not legal because all the evidence was
suppressed.
Was suppressed.
So let's have a look at the next one.
So. Oh, and actually, I have a friend on the Supreme Court who helped me, because otherwise there's so much security there, it would have been impossible to get that done. So
and he lives in Massachusetts as well. It's Stephen Breyer.
Yeah, Stephen Breyer. Stephen Breyer is a good friend, and he actually wrote about internment, saying that it was wrong. And he, he's so kind, because when I first said, I would love to bring my T-bowls to the steps of the Supreme Court, he said, oh, I don't see why not. And then he asked, and he said, you should never ask, because whenever you ask the Supreme Court something, they always say no. So then he said, I have an idea. You know, I wrote about Korematsu. We could say that you're writing an article about me, and you could lay down the T-bowls, and then I'll get out of the picture. You know, and we could pretend that you're taking, and then his staff was like, no, you're not getting involved in any of this. Yeah. So, but they said, we'll let you come and take the picture. So, you know, it's thanks to Stephen Breyer for this. Otherwise,
so
it
this
could have
is
never
also
been
in
done.
Washington. This is the
yeah.
memorial. You can see it's a crane wrapped in barbed
this is the
wire.
Japanese-American Memorial to Patriotism, and it has all the camps and how many people were in each camp. You could see Tule Lake there, that's the Japanese crane wrapped up in barbed wire.
And I find this quite moving because carved in the marble just behind where Setsu was standing to take the photograph are the words, "Here we admit a wrong." So it's the American government saying, we made a mistake, we did something terrible. But as Setsu rightly points out, this is a neglected park, things in it don't work, homeless people sleep there.
Yeah.
It's very much overlooked. So here we admit a wrong.
It's right by Union Station, and it's the favorite resting spot of homeless people.
So
Because nobody visits there, so you could take a nice nap in quiet. Yeah.
And is there a final one now, Tom, or is that the last one? No, there we are. This is.
You know, speaking of the 442nd was the segregated Japanese unit. They were the most decorated military
more Purple Hearts than any other.
Yeah, more
unit.
Purple Hearts, silver, of any unit of its size in American military history. So.
And yet, when they came back home, they didn't have homes. They came back to the internment camps, which is a terrible irony. So the last one, which is the Hyde Park Museum.
Well, they also couldn't get jobs, and they couldn't rent housing. Yeah. And then after, this is the FDR Library. When they found out about my project, the director, Paul Sparrow, invited me to come take a site-specific image at the museum. And he said I could take it anywhere I want to. And I walked all around the museum, and he had said something about Freedom Court. And I said, where's the Freedom Court? And the curator said, oh, that's outside. So I said, let's go out there. And I just knew it because it said freedom from fear. And, you know, it's Freedom Court, and my project is about freedom. And had a bust of FDR. And the sculpture at the end is actually cut out of a man and a woman cut out of the Berlin Wall. And it's a sculpture done by a woman named Edwina Sands, and she is the great-granddaughter of Churchill, of Winston Churchill, and she's also a descendant of the Sands family that gives the name to the town that I live in now, which is Sandusfield. The Sands family is her family. So now Edwina and I are best friends. She just said, oh, I'm in town, come for a buffet. I missed it, yes, the other day. But anyway, so when I got there, I thought, oh, how should I arrange my bowls? And basically, some people think it's a cross, but it's actually supposed to be a yellow shadow of a man. So it's supposed to be a shadow of the men, but it's this yellow peril, and it's over like FDR is looking over it.
So that essentially then is the 15 images, and if we go to the last image, which I think is a summary image, I think now, because I know we're overrunning our time. I'm sorry, well, it's sweet of you to stay, but I think you ought to bombard Setsu with questions.
Oh wait, I would just like to say one thing about the terminology. Internment camp is actually incorrect. The definition of internment is the legal incarceration of foreign nationals at a time of war. Okay, so the first 5,000 that were rounded up by the FBI, they were put in Justice Department camps, and if you're interned, there are 3 things that need to happen to people who are interned. One, you need to be charged with something. You have to have done something wrong. Number 2, you have to be given a trial for that. And if they find you guilty or you can't prove that you're innocent, then you can be incarcerated. But when you are protected by the Geneva Conventions, which say that you cannot be put in a condition that's worse than the people who are imprisoning you. So those are the three conditions. The people who were rounded up, majority in all the 10 internment camps, were never charged with anything. They were never given a trial, and they were not protected by the Geneva Conventions. So by definition, it is a concentration camp. So the correct terminology is the U.S. concentration camps for people of Japanese ethnicity. So that's...
So now,
yeah.
questions. Well done, Setsu.